Hey, this is Yang Nguyen, and you're listening to the Emmy Wealth Builder podcast, where we celebrate incredible immigrant success stories, share proven strategies, and give you actionable steps to build your wealth, freedom, and a lasting legacy. Let's go get it. If you think about real estate, it's just about buying a property here or there. This will change your mind. Jose is all about building an entire community. So from transforming neglected neighborhoods in Houston to launching multi-million-dollar ventures in land development, Jose's story is about vision, strategy, and heart. So he's not just about building homes, he's about building legacy. So I'm super excited to hear more from Jose, who's an entrepreneur, investor, speaker, and author who's been shaping Houston's skyline and economy for the last 35 years. Jose, welcome to the show. Please tell us more about your journey and your story to Houston.
Well, how are you, Yang? Great to see you. Great to be here. A little bit about my background.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Mexico. I grew up in Mexico City. I moved to Mexico City when I was 2 or 3 months old.
Nice.
I was actually born in the southeast region of Mexico, a little town called Coatzacoalcos in the state of Veracruz. Hard to pronounce. I had the opportunity to end up in the United States. I was fascinated by it since I was a little kid. I enjoyed the couple of times that I got to travel. The whole concept of the first world, the services, the highways, the skyscrapers, the huge airports, everything was attractive to me. So fast forward, when I had the opportunity to come here, I took it immediately. And I had a relatively nice, simple transition, thank God. Although not staying here permanently, that was a whole nother very, very complex process. Mm-hmm. But I had the opportunity to get a student visa and become a student in the United States. We always had a place here, my father being in the oil and gas business.
Interesting.
We had the opportunity to come here. And eventually I started a business from the ground up and build a life here in the United States. That's really the initial phase.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. You share that you came over here under a student visa to study. What was your major that you studied in?
Business administration originally,
okay.
Which eventually developed into other. I ended up getting 3 degrees, which was to my surprise because I was not a very good student. That was not my favorite thing. I really enjoyed business.
Nice.
More than studying. I was more into making money than learning. In retrospect, I should have made better effort or bigger attempt to get better scores in school. But regardless, I got my degrees in business administration, economics, and philosophy.
Interesting.
So I am part philosopher too.
I love it. One thing that I think our audience would appreciate hearing about is for a lot of people, a lot of immigrants specifically, they may go to school here, they may get a good degree, maybe multiple degrees just like you, and they will transition into getting a job, getting a high-paying job, and climb that corporate career. So you immediately went out and start a business. For a lot of people, that may be a lot of risk. Tell us a little bit about what went through your mind at that point. How do you mitigate risk? How do you even consider risk? And how do you approach that?
For me, it was quite the opposite. I was more fearful of not starting a business and looking for a job. I always had that fear of knocking on people's doors and asking for opportunities. And thankfully, I had friends, I knew people in the industry that my father had been in. So immediately I wanted to jump in. I didn't wait. I do believe that most young people that are concerned about starting a business, this is actually the best time. Mm-hmm. Because you have time, you have energy, you have very few financial responsibilities. And we tend to just want to have fun and relax and focus just on studying. But the practical experience is really going to come from being in business. And I chose to take that route early on. It was difficult. I have to admit that I knew that going into entrepreneurship and starting a business because school was already overwhelming. It was a lot of work, a lot of studying, a lot of late nights. But every single waking moment, this is something that I think the audience needs to hear and understand. While my friends, my fellow students would go take breaks and go play pool and take a nap and hang out with their buddies and go to the pub. I would go to an office. I would go to school, finish my classes, grab a bite to eat, and go straight to my office day in and day out. And I did that through my entire college career. This is actually the first time I brought up this. I talk a lot about starting a business, but I have never gotten into the details of my actual schedule, which was a very, very difficult schedule. And I endured my entire college, my university years, working, managing, and running from one place to the other. I was very young and already in a hurry, trying to make something out of my life. That's how it all started. And I knew that's what I wanted. So I was willing to put up with the pain, put up with the schedules, put up with the stress. And I didn't want it any other way.
I love it. I love hearing how hard you were working, how resourceful you were. One thing I want to really point to was that, as I mentioned, right, a lot of immigrants might wanting to go get a job because that is considered a safer route. But for you, I love hearing that you decided to bet on yourself. And it wasn't one of those blind bets. You actually look at your resources, you look at the connections you have to then determine, okay, I am betting on myself, and how do I set myself up for success by looking at the resources and the connections I have. Also love hearing the hustling, to be honest, not just managing 3 degrees and the course loads that come with it, but also getting the experience and getting other things outside of just academics. So I love hearing that. Tell us a little bit more about that first business. What did that look like for you? And what was it?
Sure. I talked to a lot of people over the years who have a dream, who want to do something, but they only talk about it. They don't utilize all the spare time that can be accumulated, compiled, and utilized to build something. And I always understood that it was about the little moments that we waste throughout the year, throughout the day and week and month and so on and so forth, that can be used to build something. Because the biggest excuse for not only students, but also people that actually get a job, which I'm totally fine with. I didn't choose that path. But if you end up needing a job and going to work, don't just stop there. Use after work, figure out how to work on a business plan and how to move on to the next thing. The question I get asked is, how did I start? So this business, to answer your question and answer a few others that are very related, I did not try to reinvent the wheel. I'm not that smart. I'm not that creative. I didn't go and come up with a brilliant way to start a business. I began to look at my surroundings. What do I have? Who do I know? What do I understand? What environment have I been in? And I understood the business that my family had been in, although they weren't in it anymore. My father was trying to dabble back in this business. He had retired, but he didn't speak English and he needed my help. So we helped each other and kind of partnered. But this business was an exporting company. We started being in the United States. I realized that speaking Spanish, knowing people in Mexico and Central America, I could be of service in providing some of the acquisitions and purchasing needs of the industries that I knew, that I understood. And without getting too technical and too long into a story, we became a purchasing agency for the oil and gas industry. And I did that little by little. Started with a couple of products, valves and piping, and visiting clients and making phone calls and so on and so forth. A beautiful moment in time when you're a student is that you don't have to make money immediately. You can invest your time. Many entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs do not understand the concept of working for free and planting the seed for something. They feel that they need immediate gratification and they need to be paid for every moment or every day that they work. And I was willing to just work to eventually get paid. And that's the way to start a business.
I love that you share that. I think a couple of important points that I want to emphasize, it's not all or nothing. It's not that you either study or you go to work or you just work at W-2 and there's no business. What you mentioned about thinking about maybe your W-2 is that financial partner in that sense, right? The term I remember reading was like a sliver of time, just these small chunks of hours that really add up to then build their business so that eventually, right, that will pay you so that you can leave your W-2. I also love what you share about leveraging your strength. So you speak two languages. You know how Mexico works. You know how the US works. And so you were able to essentially bridge that gap, meet that demand, and be able to build a business from there. So that's something that I really want the audience to pay attention to, especially a lot of immigrants. You have strength. You have a lot of knowledge, this diversity that can really help you build this business. And there is a demand there for you to build that business. So now you build a business, and I know you mentioned it start from, small action, right? Making a phone call, getting to know people here and there. Where did you take that business to, and at what point did you transition into your real estate?
It took many years to get to real estate and many attempts, many successful moments and many failures throughout the process before I eventually got to real estate. I had been an entrepreneur already for over 10 years by the time I got into real estate. After the oil and gas and the exporting business eventually stopped, eventually failed because of changing economies and currency exchanges and lack of payments from vendors. It was a cyclical moment. It was a transitional moment, very complicated for that industry, which developed and grew a little bit at a time. And it became very successful until the industry changed, until new technologies came about. And I was perhaps too young to adapt, to understand how to pivot and take that industry into the next level or to a new era. So eventually I started dabbling and jumping into other opportunities that came to me. Once I lost my money, I lost my business, I was down, but I had built a good network of friends and colleagues and other entrepreneurs that helped me, provided me with other opportunities, and eventually I was back on my feet doing other things. One of the aspects of this career, call it entrepreneurship, is that we all have something to offer, whether we understand it or not. We need to evaluate, what are we good at? What field do we understand? What field interests us? And follow it and start digging into how to start a business related to those aspects of any given industry that we understand. And that's kind of what I did. But skipping several years, eventually we started a very small construction company that developed into a big company with a lot of sacrifice, a lot of time over the years. Eventually it turned into a pretty good size residential construction company, but that came much later after many attempts.
Wow. It almost sounds to me like it doesn't matter what business you're in, right? It may go up, it may go down, but what really stays with you is the skill set and the people. So those are the ones that you can take with you. The term that I have been thinking a lot more about these days is this transformation of skill sets. When your expertise was in oil and gas and export, to then actually transfer some of those skill set out of that expertise completely, but take the skill set, take the connection into the next businesses and eventually into real estate. So whatever that you're working on right now, for the audience who's listening, think about those skill set, things about the people, right? Those are the two that you can take with you, and those are your strength. Whether you're starting out, like Jose said, those are the things that you can take with you into whatever next venture that you're working on. So for you now, I know you mentioned you went through many different attempts and to eventually build the residential construction company into something that's very large. What was some of those maybe pivotal moments that felt like help you make it out of all those attempts?
Oh, just persistence, my unwillingness to quit and stop and feel sorry for myself. I just wanted to keep moving forward and find a better way to do something and to try better and harder the next time. We all tend to migrate In getting back to one of the important points that you brought up, how do we utilize our know-how? How do we transport it from one business to another?
Yeah.
Where is the value? Most of us, when we change careers, even when we begin in our career, we have some basic knowledge, some fundamental understanding regarding our own personality. Are we technical? Are we artistic? Do we like numbers? Do we like people? Are we good in the sales area? We kind of understand that part. And every business has those particular components in them. They have sales, they have marketing, they have production, they have research and development, they have technology, now they have programming, they have computers. Mine was identified at some point, which was the ability to put deals together, to put the right components and the right group of people together to make a business better and more efficient and give it better probabilities to succeed. I also became pretty good at financial engineering, not in the accounting world. I was horrible in the accounting sector and still am, although now I'm extremely familiar dealing with numbers so much. But I was able to understand the numbers, financials, balance sheets, and understand a profit and loss and cost structure and numbers in every category that required a business for it to move forward and remain successful. At some point, I realized that there were many similarities within industries. Once you understand about numbers and financial statements and cost of goods sold and whatnot, all of that, once you transport it to another one, yes, there are differences and there are standards and there are some aspects of each industry that need to be adapted and learned, but the fundamentals are always there. And once you understand the language of numbers and the philosophies of entrepreneurship, of people, of understanding your objectives and your mission, you become better at migrating from one sector to another one. And you don't have to be a numbers person just like I was. And not that I consider myself a numbers person. I'm just a business, logical thinking person. That's my forte, my ability to put two and two together. But some do it in other areas that are also very fundamental to businesses, the technical aspects and the engineering aspects and the design aspects. And you can partner with others that have the abilities and the strengths that you don't. So that's how I little by little changed and moved forward. And really my unwillingness to give up. Although I felt like it very often, I wanted to throw the towel and say, this uncertainty and lack of a paycheck and lack of knowing if I'm going to be able to pay my rent or not, it gets old, it gets tiring. But if you endure it and stick to it and try to remove some of the emotion, eventually begins to pay off.
Yeah, love it. The concept of failing forward, right? You never actually fail. You either win or you learn. And the moment that you stop or give up is the moment you actually fail. Other than that, like you said, staying persistent and you never fail.
Yeah.
You just keep moving forward.
And other than making money, entrepreneurship is perceived as freedom.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to own my life. I want to own my schedules. But very few people are willing to travel the very rocky road that it's required in order to obtain that freedom. In order to get to the point where you own your life and you own your finances, it gets worse before it gets better. And that's the part that not many newcomers realize or want to deal with.
Yeah.
They just want to get to the fun part and the freedom part, but it doesn't come for free.
Right. And I think as part of entrepreneurship, I think once you get to freedom, you either find something else to climb or you find something else to solve. It's a nonstop game and it's a journey. And you always, like you said, always learning, always moving forward. But it's never just roses and rainbows and sunshine.
And that is the sickness of the business mind. People who have that strong entrepreneurship background and desire to move forward, it is very difficult to turn off your brain and to ever reach a goal because you keep increasing your own demands, raising your own standards, in wanting and needing more from yourself.
Yeah.
So what gets you there eventually starts wearing you out and wearing you down over time because you keep setting higher goals and expectations out of yourself. So this is an ongoing project of owning and building businesses, does not end right away. And there's rarely a short-term goal or a short-term achievement.
For sure. I want to definitely circle back to your urban development because I know you did a lot of developing communities across Houston. Tell us a little bit more about that repeatable urban development formula. What do you look for an area and how do you approach it?
When we began our construction company, the inner city was not very popular. These transitional neighborhoods, eclectic neighborhoods in town, were not what they are today by any stretch of the imagination. In Philadelphia or Chicago or Dallas or in Houston and many others, Atlanta, all of these inner cities were almost inhabitable. The graffiti, teardowns, crack houses, scary neighborhoods, very, very worn out. A new era of revitalization was beginning, and we were one of those first few pioneers, particularly here in Houston, where our company, I don't know if it was a combination of vision or accidentally, we began to focus on these inner city neighborhoods, thinking that it was a new trend. And little by little, we built on it. We bought more properties. We realized that there was a market. We started very inexpensive with very low price products. And that's what people wanted. They wanted affordable housing, well located, well designed with nice features. So we had a very, very interesting concept that worked. But it took some time to build because we had to build an audience. We had to create the market. The market is there now. We opened it for many people. We taught people that the inner city was hip and cool and now great looking. But at the time it wasn't. We had to take a gamble. We had to take serious risks, buy properties in areas where we had no clue if anybody would want to buy at that particular moment. Little by little, we expanded into more and more neighborhoods where we became very well known for revitalizing inner city neighborhoods. That became our niche market.
Interesting. So you're essentially creating your own comp, so to speak. For a lot of residential, right, your comparables are created by how people buy and sell. Often with newer revitalization project, as developers, you often have to create your own comparables because there's nothing in that neighborhood.
They were not any, particularly in the first few homes that we built. There was nothing like it. We had to guess what they would sell for. There were no comps, even within the close proximity. We just had to figure out one step at a time. And here's the irony also, something I rarely talk about, I don't think it's ever come up with. The people who made the money in the early years of our company were the investors that we were buying the land from. And here's why. We would buy a property, which incredibly, areas that now are $100 to $150 a foot, I was buying them for $1 a foot.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that. It's gone exponentially 100 times the value in the period of time from when I started. But we would buy a property, build a little bungalow, a cottage, a small house, sell it, and now the next property on the same neighborhood wanted more money. You know, hey, what are you talking about? We just bought it for, well, but now there's new construction. Are you kidding? We build the new construction. Well, too bad. Things are looking better. Thank you very much. But now I need more money for my lot. And we did that to ourselves. We increased our own land values for years. Every cycle, every time we would turn around and buy the next round of lots, our profit would go to buy the next property, and they would pocket the money while we were educating the market. Until we develop other secrets of how to saturate neighborhoods. Eventually, we got very, very experienced and smarter, but at first we were getting beat by the lack of market, the low sales prices, and the constantly increasing land values were not helping at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I always imagine it as in like kind of like a bell curve, right? If you're getting at a very early, there's certainly much higher risk, right? Because you don't have any demonstrated success in that
Yeah.
location. So you have to take much higher risk, but with that, there's higher reward. And then with that, you now essentially creating more trends. So now more people are seeing that and now they're getting in, pushing the price up, and things continue to increase. Tell us a little bit more about how you were able to fund. Were you self-funding most of these projects? Because I would imagine as lenders, if there's no comp, if there's none of that, it's probably hard to get some good funding on those.
Everything was hard at first, and every step of the way was difficult, and it was slow. We did not grow overnight. We did not make money overnight. Nothing happened overnight. Finding land was difficult. Buying the land was difficult. Financing was next to impossible. Getting a line of credit. But eventually we had all the land, all the money, all the lines of credit. We just had to give it time. And the process was, now, of course, the land was much less expensive. If you can imagine, our first acquisition was $7,500. We bought a property. I had a little bit of money. I had lost most of my wealth of my previous business, which is a whole nother long story. I was running out of money, but I was able to acquire a small piece of property where we built a house, and we bought it for $7,500. Those lots are running now for $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000.
Wow.
It's amazing what, 100 times more than what I paid for. They would not give me a loan to build a home because we had no credentials, we had no history, no credibility. So I went and borrowed a little bit of money from a bank to build myself a house. And my credit was good, so they allowed me to build a small little house to build it for myself. But we put it up for sale. So the contingency plans was, if the house didn't sell, I would just keep it and live in it and pay the mortgage and figure it out. But the house sold. And that was a fascinating moment for us in learning and understanding the business. In our earlier years, just to finalize responding to this question, when we needed money in our early stages, since we had no experience and very little credit, nobody really knew us. Nobody really trusted us with money, whether it was for equity or for a line of credit to build homes. So we had to bootstrap, just go from one house to 2 to 4 to 8, so on, tighten our belts, be very frugal, very conservative, not spend our money on anything else other than the business, be responsible, and build it. By the time we started growing, and we were now offered money left and right by banks and investors, and everybody wanted in, we didn't need it anymore. I mean, we were already growing organically and exponentially, and it didn't make any sense. So when I needed money, I wasn't able to get it. And by the time everybody offered it to me, I didn't want it anymore. So I never used investors in the company.
Got it. Interesting. One thing I really want to point to is, and for a lot of audience listening, right? Your growth is not going to look linear. It's going to look like a hockey stick, right? There's going to be a long period of time at the beginning when it's really like you're really grinding, you're really working things through. And all of a sudden, it feels like an overnight success, even though you've been grinding for years to get to that point.
Yeah. It takes years to be an overnight success. There is no such thing unless you inherit it, somebody hands it to you. But even the great startups took 10 years at least to build something. And I think the hockey stick scenario is very positive. I would say it's optimistic. I would say it's more of a graph of swing that goes up and down. Sometimes you're worse off than where you start. Sometimes it's a reverse hockey stick where, I mean, I've been up, I made money, and then something that I want to point out that not many people understand, being an executive, being an officer of a large corporation has nothing to do with being an entrepreneur. When you're an executive, you get paid, you take your money, you put it somewhere else, and it's yours. When you're an entrepreneur, something goes bad, you bring that money. You bring it back, you put it back and invest it back to save the company, to fix problems. So it's a very different story. To those have nothing against the corporate world and high-level executives and VPs and CEOs, but they get their cash and their risk is no longer there.
Yes.
But for an entrepreneur, you're liable, you're accountable, and I felt it. Every time I build wealth, I'm talking about building multi-million-dollar businesses, something went wrong and they took away my millions. I was not able to just walk away and clean and walk away from the business. That is not how or at least small businesses and medium businesses. Once you become a public entity and start working with institutional capital, that's a whole nother story. But for us small business owners, you're in it for the long term until you either eventually sell the business or you wind things down and walk away from it and retire.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're in it.
Yeah, fully. I appreciate you sharing that so authentically. I definitely want to dig just a little bit in detail into how you pick these communities to develop. I know you said that at that point, right? Those are often pretty high risk. And often in larger cities, there's a lot of those pockets all across the city. Are there other external factors that you look for to identify, like, okay, this is the pocket that I'm going to go into because it is prime? It sounds like you're going to changing like a collective of homes, a communities, but there are still some other factors outside of it that you can't control. Are there any of those external factors that you look for before you decide, like, hey, this is the spot that I'm going to tackle next?
It's very funny, very interesting, because there are different ways to go about it. When we began building, it was mostly gut feeling. It was really just figuring out what made sense in relation to other aspects of the community. The proximity to commercial, to a new restaurant. There was very little going on. I'm talking about the 90s, when some of these inner city pockets had very little to offer. In our early stages, it was mostly just getting a feel for what was going on. There's a new little strip center. Why don't we try to build a couple of houses here next to it or right behind it or to some proximity to whatever was going on there? Eventually, as we started growing, we were able to create markets. Now you can buy larger pieces, not only larger pieces of land, but a larger number of them, where you can start creating and building a little bit of activity and making noise. Hey, this neighborhood is changing. We are changing it. We are improving it. People follow. They see, oh my God, there's a lot of new construction going on in this small pocket of town. So in the early stages, it's gut feeling and risk and gamble. As you grow, it's by design. You begin to create those pockets of town and improving them. Eventually, as there's more and more competitors, of course, it gets trickier. It gets to be a combination of continuing to build in some of the already developing neighborhoods. And how do we come up with new ones? Well, the newer strategies are getting trickier because there's many, many more players and things are getting more expensive and everybody knows the tricks. They know where the city is gearing towards, moving towards, or migrating to. You can see what are some of the logical neighborhoods that are coming up next.
Got it.
But you need to do some research. Most people don't research with a city, with your trade centers, with your chambers of commerce, what companies are coming, what replats are occurring, who's doing what, who's building what. You can get informed of bigger developments, of multi-use, of bigger commercial things that are happening. The large corporations invest a lot of money in demographics and research. So if you follow what they're doing, and this research is available, you can go and probably buy some properties around those. But not many people take the time. So now we try to investigate a little bit of what's coming up, a little bit of creating our own markets, and partly is understanding who else is doing what.
Got it. Love it. That gut feeling that you talk about, Jose, like that comes from living locally, right? So if I don't know much about Houston, so I won't have that gut feeling if I was trying to develop in Houston. But this is where you can talk to people who live there, right? Some of those that you said gut feeling, that's the logical sense of like, oh, if there are road, right? If it's easy to access the highway from this location and I can access to other place from this location, easy for people to drive to work. Those are some of the indicator that it might be a good place for people to move to. The second thing you said, Jose, that's really good is that there are a lot of people follow business, people follow jobs, people follow retails, right? So if those are coming up, those are great way to like, hey, if you're a residential investors, the developers of these retail, of the commercial space are the people you should follow and essentially tag on to their success, right? By building a lot of these residential around because they may just want to develop commercially, but you can now tag on to their success. The third great point is your city, right? Always have a plan. A lot of those plans might be infrastructure, meaning what road they're building, what bridge, what park, all of those, right? They may even have business plan about whether they are going to waive certain tax for business to come in. So those are all great indicators that a city is preparing itself for growth. And that's how you know that you can follow suit. Because those are things that is very hard for individual investors. The caveat I would point out to that is that you definitely want to make sure to read about how long that has been in the work for. If you know anything about city planning and about city development, some of these train track, these things have been in the work for 20 years and it's never happened. So you kind of want to do some research like what Jose said, right? Go back a little bit and really see about how realistic these growth plans are and use that to plan your next investment. So I definitely want to pivot into your mystery question. These are the questions that was left behind by our previous guests. And your mystery question, Jose, is how do you balance success and a meaningful life?
Oh, that's a good question. When you achieve some level of success, and that is really determined by yourself, because success is a very subjective, very abstract term, and it means different things to different people. You need to know when to slow down. I've made the mistake of setting some targets. When I get to this number of employees or this dollar figure or this size of company or whatever, I'm going to relax and slow down. And when I get there, I forget that I had a target. How do I do it? By recognizing what is enough. Enough is enough. You cannot just go on and on forever. And understand what you wanted the success for. We forget another abstract concept is the financial freedom. What does it mean to you? A lot of us want to make money. A lot of us want to be successful. But many of us don't really know what for. And if you didn't have a plan when you started, you may very well be sucked by the system of being in a hurry and work, and never living your life because you never had a plan in the first place. You did not understand what it is that you wanted to enjoy out of life. So you need to set those personal goals. And I understand that in the early stages, there is very little balance. It's all work, it's all pressure, it's all stress, it's all responsibility, and it's okay. You have to pay your dues, you have to put up with it. But when you start getting there, start remembering why it is that you got in the business to begin with. And now you can start enjoying some balance. So identifying your personal objectives and putting some deadlines to start living your life, those are some of the ways that I've figured out how to balance. For example, when my kids were born, I somewhat retired for a while. I stopped operating this business that was lucrative, that was making money, that was very successful, because I wanted time to be with my children in their first few years. And I did it. So I just had to make up my mind as to what I wanted out of my life.
I love that. I love hearing what you said about essentially success doesn't mean anything, right? Unless you truly have your why. And it may change. Success to you may change with time. And I love what you mentioned about going back to like what for. Because success defined by society may mean very different things than it means to you personally. And I love you share about how you recognized when your children was born, that was your definition of success, being able to spend time with them. And I love that you were able to take that time. If you have any charity or cause that you want to support, I would love for the audience to have the opportunity to thank you for your time being here today by supporting the charity of cause of your choice.
Well, thank you. I participated randomly in different ones. I adhere people that have experienced cancer, so we're a little bit involved there.
Okay.
I was blessed to have spent some time in the Shriners hospitals as a child in the burn care center. So the Shriners is something that is very dear to me. And without getting into detail, every charity that feeds children, that is probably the one that hits me the hardest.
Awesome.
I believe that no child should ever go hungry in this planet.
Agree.
That is a tough one for me to swallow.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll put that in the show notes. And Jose, tell the audience how they can get in touch with you and find out more about the projects that you have going on and follow your journey.
JoseBerlanga.com. That's where I can be found. I'm very easy to find. If you Google me, Jose Berlanga, I have all my social media accounts. Very little activity. I must admit, I am not the social media type of guy. These chats, these conversations are so fun and interesting to me. But yeah, for now, those are it. Hopefully, you'll be seeing much more of me very soon.
I love it. No worries. We will create assets for you and we'll tag you on there. But I'll link your website and the link to your book in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing with us your story. It's been super helpful to learn more about what you do and just learn more about the strategy and the actionable step and your advice on entrepreneurship and business ownership. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening, everyone. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.